The deep space scanner on the Kaleth warship beeped 3 times, then fell silent. Captain Rex looked up from his reports and walked over to the sensor station where Lieutenant Mora was staring at her screen with confusion. "What do you have?" Rex asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded ships for 20 years. "Unknown vessel, sir," Mora replied, pointing at the green dot on her display. "Large signature, dead in space near the 4th planet of the Vega system." Rex studied the readings. The ship was massive, easily twice the size of their own dreadnought, but it showed no power signatures. No engines running, no weapons charged, no life support systems active. It just drifted through space like a piece of debris. "Send the data to Admiral Crone," Rex ordered, "and prepare a full scan." 3 hours later, the response came back from the Admiral himself. Rex read the message twice before calling his bridge crew together. The Admiral wanted the mysterious ship captured and brought back to Kepler base for analysis. This was not a request. The next morning, Rex stood on the observation deck of his ship, the Silence, watching as the unknown vessel grew larger on the view screen. As they approached, details became clear that made Rex frown. The ship looked like it had been built by someone who had never heard of proper engineering. The hull was covered in patches of different materials welded on top of each other. Some sections were clearly newer than others, as if the ship had been repaired many times, using whatever materials were available. The metal was scarred and burned in places, showing signs of weapon damage that had been hastily fixed. "It looks like a junk pile," Lieutenant Mora said, standing beside him. Rex nodded. Whoever built this thing had no sense of design. "Look at those weapon mounts." The ship bristled with weapons, but they were all different types and sizes. Some looked like they had been torn from other vessels and bolted on wherever they would fit. There was no pattern, no elegant design, just raw, firepower mounted wherever space allowed. Chief Engineer Vel joined them at the window. She was known throughout the fleet for her precise work and attention to detail. Looking at the human ship made her shake her head in disgust. "Those power lines are running outside the hull," she said, pointing at thick cables that snaked across the ship's surface. "Any decent engineer would run them through protected channels inside the ship. This is amateur work." The boarding party reported back an hour later. The ship was completely empty of crew but showed signs of recent habitation. The corridors were dark and cold, lit only by emergency lighting that ran on backup power. Team Leader Jack described what they found with barely hidden contempt. "The whole ship is like this," he said over the communication system. "Nothing matches. Different types of metal, different welding techniques, different power systems. It's like they took parts from a dozen different ships and stuck them together." Rex walked through the captured ship himself later that day. What he saw confirmed his first impressions. The human vessel was a monument to poor planning and worse execution. The corridors were too narrow in some places and too wide in others. The ceiling height changed randomly, as if different sections had been built by different people who never talked to each other. The crew quarters were small and cramped, with bunks stacked 3 high in rooms barely large enough for one person. The walls were covered with patches and repairs, showing that even the living spaces had taken damage during combat. Rex found it hard to imagine anyone choosing to live in such conditions. The engine room was the worst part. Instead of one clean, efficient power plant, the humans had installed what looked like 6 different types of engines. Some were clearly much older than others, and all of them were connected by a maze of pipes and cables that would give any proper engineer nightmares. "How does this thing even work?" Vel asked, staring at the mess of machinery. "Barely, I would guess," Rex replied. "These humans have no understanding of efficiency or proper design. They found the ship's name painted on a bulkhead in simple letters, Defiance. Rex thought it was typical of the species. They seemed to think that attitude could replace skill and proper engineering. The weapon systems were just as bad as everything else. The humans had mounted every type of weapon Rex had ever seen, and several he had not. There were kinetic cannons that looked like they belonged on mining ships, missile launchers that were clearly designed for destroying asteroids, and what appeared to be industrial cutting lasers modified for combat. They just grabbed whatever weapons they could find and bolted them to the hull, Jack reported. There's no central fire control, no integrated targeting system. Each weapon group has its own controls. Rex shook his head. The Caliph had always prided themselves on elegant weapon systems that worked together as a single unit. This human approach of mounting random weapons wherever they would fit seemed childish and ineffective. The ship's computer systems were just as confusing. Instead of one central computer running everything, the humans had installed separate computers for different functions. The navigation system had its own computer, the weapons had their own, life support had its own, and there were several more that no one could figure out what they were for. It's like they don't trust any single system to work properly, Lieutenant Mora observed. Everything has backups, and the backups have backups. Admiral Crone arrived at Kepler Base the same day the captured ship was towed into the analysis bay. He was a tall, impressive figure who had built his reputation on understanding enemy capabilities and exploiting their weaknesses. Rex met him at the docking port and gave him a full report on what they had found. "So the humans are even more primitive than we thought," Crone said after hearing the details. "This ship is held together with determination and luck rather than proper engineering." They walked through the Defiance together, with Crone stopping to examine the crude repairs and amateur modifications. His expression grew more confident with each new example of human incompetence. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a section where the humans had welded a piece of civilian hull plating over what appeared to be a large hole. They patched combat damage with metal from a cargo ship. No proper warship would ever be repaired this way. The Admiral ordered a complete analysis of every system on the ship. He wanted to understand human technology completely before the Dominion began its planned expansion into human space. This captured vessel would provide all the intelligence they needed. "We'll take this ship apart piece by piece," Crone told his staff. "Every system, every component, every design choice. When we're done, we'll understand exactly how primitive these humans really are." Dr. Nex, the Dominion's chief expert on alien technology, arrived the next day with a team of specialists. She was known for her ability to understand any technology, no matter how strange or advanced. Looking at the human ship, she seemed almost disappointed. "This will not take long," she told Admiral Crone. "The technology is clearly several generations behind our own. We should have a complete analysis within a few weeks." Rex watched from the observation deck as the analysis teams swarmed over the Defiance. The human ship sat in the analysis bay, like a defeated enemy, its crude hull and amateur modifications exposed for all to see. He felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that the Dominion's superiority had been proven once again. The humans had built a ship that looked impressive from a distance, but close examination revealed the truth. They were a species that relied on brute force and crude solutions instead of elegant engineering and superior technology. When the time came for conquest, the Dominion would face no real challenge from such primitive opponents. Admiral Crone stood beside him, watching the analysis. "Teams begin their work. This ship will tell us everything we need to know about human capabilities," he said confidently. "And what it tells us is that they pose no real threat to the Dominion." Rex nodded in agreement, but something nagged at the back of his mind. The ship was crude and poorly designed, but it was also huge and heavily armed. Whatever battles it had survived them. That suggested either incredible luck or something else entirely. Dr. Nex stood in the main analysis bay, surrounded by her team of specialists as they began their detailed examination of the human battleship. She had brought 12 of the Dominion's best engineers and scientists to Kepler Base, each one an expert in different aspects of alien technology. Looking at the crude human vessel, she expected this to be one of the easiest assignments of her career. "Begin with the power systems," she ordered her team. "I want to understand how they generate energy with such primitive equipment." Engineer Tam was the first to report back, and his findings were puzzling. "Doctor, this ship has 17 different power generation systems," he said, checking his scanner readings twice to make sure he was correct. 17 completely different types of generators. Nex frowned. "That makes no sense. Why would anyone install so many different power systems?" Tam led her to the engine section, where the confusion only grew worse. The humans had installed fusion reactors next to antimatter containment units. which were connected to what appeared to be solar collection arrays and even primitive chemical fuel cells. Each system was independent of the others, with its own control mechanisms and safety protocols. "Look at this," Tam said, pointing to a massive generator that took up an entire room. "This is a stellar plasma collector, designed to draw energy directly from a star's corona. But over here," he moved to another section, "they have a simple battery bank that could power a small civilian ship." The power distribution system was equally baffling. Instead of elegant energy conduits that would carry power efficiently throughout the ship, the humans had run thick cables along the outside of the hull, through maintenance tunnels and even through crew living areas. The cables were protected by heavy armor plating, but the whole system looked like something built by people who had never heard of proper electrical engineering. Dr. Nex moved to the weapons analysis section, where Specialist Kiv was examining the human armaments with growing bewilderment. The ship carried over 200 separate weapons of dozens of different types. Some were clearly military grade, but others appeared to be mining equipment, construction tools, and even what looked like scientific instruments modified for combat. "They have kinetic cannons that fire solid metal slugs," Kiv reported, "but they also have particle beam weapons, plasma projectors, and missile launchers that use chemical explosives. I've never seen such a random collection of weapons on a single vessel." The strangest discovery was in the missile storage bays. The humans had stored thousands of different types of missiles, from simple explosive warheads to complex guided munitions that could apparently think for themselves. Some missiles were clearly designed to destroy other ships, while others seemed intended for planetary bombardment or asteroid mining. "They have enough ammunition to fight continuously for months," Kiv said, reading from his analysis pad. "I've counted storage areas throughout the ship, and they're all filled with weapons and ammunition. It's like they expected to be cut off from resupply for extended periods." The defensive systems were just as confusing. The ship's armor was not a single coherent design, but rather layers upon layers of different materials. Some sections had military-grade composite armor, while others were protected by what appeared to be repurposed cargo containers filled with sand, metal scraps, and even organic materials. Engineer Vell examined the hull construction with growing frustration. "They've welded additional armor plating over the original hull in at least 15 different locations," she reported. "Some of these repairs were clearly done in space under combat conditions. The welding is rough but functional." The ship's life support systems defied every principle of efficient design that the Kaleth had developed over centuries of spaceflight. Instead of one central atmospheric processor, the humans had installed 43 separate life support systems throughout the ship. Each section could be sealed off and maintain its own air, water, and temperature independent of all other sections. "Why would anyone design a ship this way?" asked Junior Engineer Pax, staring at the maze of air recycling equipment. "It's incredibly wasteful and inefficient." Dr. Nex was beginning to suspect that efficiency was not something the humans valued. Every system on the ship had multiple backups, and those backups had backups of their own. The navigation computer was surrounded by 6 auxiliary computers, each capable of running the ship independently. Even simple functions like door controls had manual overrides that could be operated without any computer assistance. The medical bay provided more disturbing insights. Dr. Nex examined the surgical equipment and found tools designed to treat injuries she had never seen before. There were devices for removing metal fragments embedded deep in tissue, equipment for treating severe radiation poisoning, and surgical robots programmed to operate on patients whose bodies had been partially dissolved by unknown chemicals. What kind of battles were these humans fighting? She wondered aloud, examining a medical scanner that was calibrated to detect 17 different types of energy weapon damage. The ship's database proved to be the most challenging part of the analysis. The humans had stored information in dozens of different formats, using encryption methods that seemed to change randomly throughout the ship. Some files were protected by simple passwords, while others required complex mathematical calculations to access. Specialist Drew, the team's computer expert, worked for 3 days before managing to access even the most basic ship functions. "Their data storage methods are completely inconsistent," he reported. It's like different parts of the ship were built by different groups of people who never communicated with each other. When Drew finally accessed the ship's maintenance logs, the team discovered something that made them all uncomfortable. The Defiance had been heavily damaged and repaired dozens of times. The logs showed battle damage from weapons that didn't match anything in the Kaleth database, repairs made using materials that shouldn't exist, and modifications installed to counter threats that sounded like science fiction. According to these records, they once repaired the main hull using metal taken from a destroyed enemy ship, Drew said, reading from the translated files. The enemy ship was apparently made of a material that could regenerate itself, so they had to treat it with some kind of virus to keep it stable. Dr. Nex felt the first stirrings of unease as she read through more of the maintenance records. The humans hadn't just fought 1 or 2 battles with this ship. They had been in continuous combat for years, facing enemies with technologies that seemed far more advanced than anything the Kaleth possessed. The crew quarters told their own story of long-term conflict. The humans had converted storage areas into small factories for manufacturing ammunition and spare parts. They had installed hydroponic gardens in what should have been recreational areas, turning every available space into something necessary for survival. "Look at this," Engineer Tam called from a section near the ship's center. They converted an entire deck into a medical facility. Not just a sick bay, but a full hospital with surgical suites, recovery wards, and what appears to be a prosthetics manufacturing facility. The prosthetics were particularly unsettling. The humans had developed artificial limbs and organs that could integrate directly with the nervous system, allowing injured crew members to continue fighting even after suffering injuries that would disable or kill most other species. After 2 weeks of analysis, Dr. Nex called a meeting with Admiral Crone to discuss their preliminary findings. She had expected to present a simple report on primitive human technology, but what she had discovered was far more complex and disturbing. "The ship is not as primitive as we initially believed," she told the Admiral. "Their engineering approaches are crude, but they're also incredibly robust. Every system is designed to continue functioning even when heavily damaged." Admiral Crone studied the reports with growing concern. "You're saying their technology is more advanced than we thought?" "No," Dr. Nex replied carefully. "Their technology is different than we thought. It's not more advanced, but it's designed for conditions we've never had to consider. This ship was built to fight in environments where elegant engineering would be a liability." The Admiral walked through the Defiance again that night, looking at the crude repairs and amateur modifications with new eyes. The humans hadn't built this ship to impress anyone with their engineering skills. They had built it to survive situations that would destroy more sophisticated vessels. As he stood in the main corridor, surrounded by the maze of pipes, cables, and backup systems that ran throughout the ship, Admiral Crone began to wonder what kind of enemies could force an entire species to build their ships this way. The Defiance wasn't just a warship. It was a survivor. Junior researcher Gil was working the night shift when he made the discovery that changed everything. He had been assigned to translate the human ship's routine maintenance logs, expecting to find boring records of equipment repairs and supply requests. Instead, he found references to battles that made no sense according to everything the Dominion knew about human capabilities. The first strange entry was dated 3 months earlier. It mentioned repairs to the main hull after what the humans called the Zephyr incident. According to the log, the Defiance had fought something called Void Hunters in a system that didn't appear on any Kaleth star chart. The battle had lasted 18 hours, and the ship had taken damage from weapons that could apparently eat through metal. Gil read the entry 3 times before calling his supervisor. "Dr. Nex, I think you need to see this," he said over the communication system. "These maintenance logs are describing battles against enemies we've never heard of." Dr. Nex arrived at the analysis bay 20 minutes later, still wearing her sleeping clothes. She read the log entry Gil had found, then accessed the ship's database to search for more information about the Zephyr incident. What she found made her blood run cold. The humans had fought a running battle against creatures that lived in empty space itself. The Void Hunters were described as beings of pure energy that could phase through normal matter, making conventional weapons useless. The Defiance had survived by using specially modified weapons that could disrupt energy patterns, but the battle had cost them 37 crew members and required major repairs to 3 entire decks. "This is impossible," Dr. Nex muttered, reading through the detailed battle report. "Nothing can live in the vacuum of space without some kind of protective vessel or suit." Gil pulled up another log entry, this one from 6 months earlier. The Defiance had fought something called crystal ships near a star that was apparently hollow. The enemy vessels were made of living crystal that could regenerate damage faster than conventional weapons could inflict it. The humans had won by using mining charges to collapse part of the hollow star, trapping the crystal ships in stellar plasma. The medical logs from that battle were even more disturbing. The ship's doctor had treated crew members for injuries caused by crystal fragments that continued growing inside their bodies. Several crew members had required complete surgical removal of organs that had been crystallized by enemy weapons. The prosthetics manufacturing facility Gil had discovered earlier suddenly made terrible sense. Dr. Nex spent the rest of the night reading through the ship's combat records, each one more impossible than the last. The Defiance had fought mechanical swarms that could disassemble matter at the atomic level, energy beings that fed on electromagnetic radiation, and something called time pirates that could apparently move backwards through history to attack their enemies before the battle even started. By morning, she had identified 17 major battles over the past 2 years, each against enemies that would have been considered science fiction by Caleth standards. The humans hadn't just survived these encounters, they had developed specific tactics and technologies to counter each type of threat. When Admiral Crone arrived at the base that morning, Dr. Nex met him at the docking bay with a stack of translated reports and a look of barely controlled panic on her face. "Admiral, we need to talk immediately," she said. "What we've discovered about this ship changes everything." They went to the Admiral's private office, where Dr. Nex spread out the translated logs and began explaining what the analysis team had found. Admiral Crone's expression grew more serious with each new revelation, until he was leaning forward in his chair with his hands clasped tightly together. "You're telling me the humans have been fighting wars against enemies that could destroy our entire fleet?" he asked after hearing about the Void Hunters. "Not just fighting them," Dr. Nex replied. "Winning against them. This ship has survived battles that should have been impossible to survive. Every crude modification, every backup system, every redundant component was designed based on combat experience against threats we didn't know existed." The Admiral stood up and walked to the window overlooking the analysis bay, where the Defiance sat surrounded by Caleth equipment and personnel. The human ship no longer looked primitive to him. It looked like something that had been forged in conflicts beyond his imagination. Captain Rex joined them an hour later, bringing additional information that made the situation even worse. His intelligence staff had been analyzing the star charts found in the human ship's navigation computer, and what they discovered contradicted everything the Dominion believed about the galaxy. "The humans have colonies and systems we marked as uninhabitable," Rex reported. "They're mining asteroids in regions where our surveys detected lethal radiation levels. They have trade routes through sectors where our probe ships were destroyed by unknown phenomena. The human expansion wasn't the random colonization effort the Caleth had assumed. It was systematic conquest of the galaxy's most dangerous regions, areas where other species couldn't survive long enough to establish permanent settlements. While the Dominion had built their empire in the relatively safe Outer Rim, humans had claimed territory in what they called the Deep Dark." Dr. Nex pulled up a 3-dimensional map showing human territories based on the star charts from the Defiance. The pattern was immediately obvious and terrifying. Human space formed a protective barrier around the galaxy's central regions, where the most dangerous phenomena and hostile entities were concentrated. "They're not expanding randomly," she said, pointing to the map. "They're deliberately settling in areas that serve as buffers against threats from the galactic core. Every human colony is positioned to intercept something trying to move outward, toward safer regions." The implications hit Admiral Crone like a physical blow. The Caleth Dominion existed because humans were fighting constant wars to keep galaxy-killing threats contained in the Deep Dark. If humanity fell, those threats would sweep outward into regions like the Outer Rim, where peaceful species like the Caleth would have no defense against them. Engineer Vel arrived with more disturbing news from her analysis of the ship's construction records. The Defiance hadn't been built as a warship originally. It had started as a colony transport vessel, designed to carry civilian families to new settlements. The weapons, armor, and defensive modifications had all been added over time as the ship encountered increasingly hostile forces. This vessel evolved into a battleship through necessity, Vell reported. Every modification represents a lesson, learned in combat. The backup systems, the redundant components, the crude repairs, they're all responses to specific threats the crew encountered during their missions. The ship's original construction records painted a picture of gradual transformation, from peaceful transport to hardened warship. The first modifications had been simple defensive measures, additional armor plating, and basic weapons for protection against pirates and raiders. But as the ship ventured deeper into dangerous territory, the modifications became more extensive and specialized. The medical bay expansion had been added after the crew encountered biological weapons that could dissolve human tissue. The prosthetics facility was installed following battles against enemies that specifically targeted limbs and organs. The multiple power systems were a response to weapons that could drain energy from conventional generators. Captain Rex studied the ship's service record and made a connection that chilled everyone in the room. If this is what humans accomplish with a converted civilian vessel, what are their purpose-built warships capable of? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The Defiance was obsolete by human standards, scheduled for retirement, and replacement by newer, more advanced vessels. If this crude, patched-together ship could survive battles against impossible enemies, what could humanity's current military technology accomplish? Dr. Nex accessed the ship's technical databases and found references to newer human designs that made the Defiance look like a child's toy. The newest human battleships were apparently built from materials that could exist in multiple dimensions, simultaneously, powered by captured black holes and armed with weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas. Admiral Crone realized that the Caleth Dominion had been living in a peaceful bubble, protected by human sacrifices they didn't even know were being made. The crude, ugly ship sitting in their analysis bay wasn't evidence of human technological inferiority. It was evidence of human determination to survive in conditions that would annihilate more sophisticated civilizations. The final piece of the puzzle came from the ship's communication logs. The Defiance had been in regular contact with other human vessels and colonies throughout its service, reporting on enemy movements, requesting supplies and reinforcements, and coordinating defensive strategies with military commands scattered throughout the deep dark. The logs revealed that humanity operated a vast military infrastructure, hidden in regions too dangerous for other species to explore. They maintained battle fleets, research stations, and manufacturing facilities and systems, where phenomena like temporal storms, reality distortions, and hostile energy beings made normal space travel impossible. As the full scope of human capability became clear, Admiral Crone felt a growing sense of dread. The Dominion had been planning to expand into human territory, expecting easy conquest of a primitive species. Instead, they had discovered that humanity was the only thing standing between peaceful civilization and threats that could end all life in the galaxy. Admiral Crone called an emergency meeting of the Dominion High Command, using the fastest communication channels available. Within 6 hours, the most powerful leaders of the Caleth Empire were connected through secure transmissions, their faces appearing on screens around the conference table at Kepler Base. None of them looked pleased to be awakened in the middle of their sleep cycles for what they assumed was routine intelligence gathering. Supreme Commander Vex spoke first, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had ruled the Dominion for 30 years. Admiral Crone, this better be important. You've pulled us away from critical state business to discuss the analysis of a single primitive vessel. Crone looked around the table at the assembled leadership, knowing that what he was about to tell them would shatter their understanding of the galaxy. Supreme Commander, honored colleagues, what we have discovered about this human ship changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. He activated the holographic display system and began showing the translated records from the Defiance. The first image was a tactical map showing the battle against the Void Hunters, complete with damage reports and casualty figures. The assembled Leaders stared at the display with growing confusion. These records indicate the humans fought energy-based life forms that can phase through normal matter, Crone explained. The battle lasted 18 hours and required specialized weapons that disrupt energy patterns. 37 human crew members died in this single engagement. Defense Minister Gok leaned forward in his chair. Admiral, this must be some kind of human propaganda or training simulation. Nothing can survive in the vacuum of space without protective equipment. Dr. Nex stepped forward and activated another display, showing medical records from the battle. Minister, these are surgical reports detailing the treatment of injuries caused by energy weapons that don't appear in any of our databases. The ship's medical officer performed operations to remove energy parasites that were consuming crew members from the inside. The room fell silent as the implications began to sink in. Intelligence Director Talk was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. If these records are accurate, the humans have been fighting wars against enemies we didn't know existed. Crone nodded grimly and brought up the star charts showing human territories. It's worse than that. The humans have established colonies and military bases in regions of space we classified as uninhabitable. They're not just fighting these enemies. They're winning against them and claiming territory in the most dangerous parts of the galaxy. The three-dimensional map rotated slowly, showing the distribution of human settlements throughout the deep dark. Each colony was positioned at strategic locations where threats from the galactic core would naturally emerge, creating a defensive barrier that protected the entire outer rim. Supreme Commander Vex studied the map with growing alarm. You're saying the humans are deliberately settling in the most dangerous regions of space? More than that, Dr. Nex replied. They're systematically conquering those regions. Every human colony serves a military purpose, either as an early warning station, a forward base, or a containment facility for threats too dangerous to allow loose in the galaxy. The analysis team had spent 3 weeks decoding the human communication logs, revealing a vast military infrastructure hidden in areas too hostile for other species to explore. The humans maintained research stations inside stellar phenomena that would destroy Calith ships instantly, operated mining facilities in asteroid fields populated by hostile machine intelligences, and ran training academies in systems where reality itself was unstable. Captain Rex presented the military assessment that terrified the leadership most. Based on the ship's technical manuals and communication logs, the Defiance is considered obsolete by current human standards. It was scheduled for decommission and replacement by newer vessels with capabilities that exceed our understanding. The room erupted in alarmed voices as the leaders tried to process this information. If the crude, patched-together ship that had impressed them with its survival capabilities was obsolete, what were the humans currently building? Dr. Nex answered that question by displaying technical specifications found in the ship's database. The newest human battleships were apparently constructed using materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing them to phase in and out of normal space at will. They were powered by controlled black holes and armed with weapons that could manipulate fundamental forces like gravity and time. This can't be real, Defense Minister Gok said, staring at the specifications in disbelief. No species could develop technology this advanced without our intelligence networks detecting it. Intelligence Director Talk looked uncomfortable as he answered. Our intelligence networks focus on the outer rim and middle regions of the galaxy. We've never sent deep space probes into the areas where humans are operating because the danger levels were considered too high for any practical purpose. The truth was devastating. The Caleth Dominion had built their empire in the safest, most peaceful regions of space, while completely ignoring the constant warfare raging in the deep dark. They had assumed that the dangerous core regions were empty of intelligent life, never realizing that humans were fighting continuous battles to keep galaxy-ending threats contained. Supreme Commander Vex asked the question everyone was thinking. If humans possess this level of technology and military capability, why haven't they expanded into our territory? They could have conquered the Outer Rim decades ago. The answer came from the ship's diplomatic archives, which contained records of human contact with dozens of species throughout the galaxy. The humans had established trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and territorial boundaries with civilizations the Caleth had never heard of. They were apparently more interested in protecting other species than conquering them. The humans seem to operate under what they call a containment doctrine, Dr. Nex explained. Their primary goal is preventing threats from the galactic core from spreading outward. They view themselves as guardians rather than conquerors. Admiral Crone brought up the final piece of evidence that sealed their fate. Hidden deep in the ship's communication logs was a message that had been transmitted just before the Defiance was abandoned. The message was addressed to Human Military Command and contained a simple but chilling report. Bait deployed successfully. Kaleth forces have taken possession of obsolete vessel as predicted. Recommend immediate deployment of containment fleet to prevent Dominion interference with core region security. The silence that followed this revelation was deafening. Every leader around the table understood the implications immediately. The humans had deliberately allowed their ship to be captured, knowing that Kaleth arrogance would compel them to study it rather than destroy it immediately. Commander Yak of Dominion Space Operations was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. They wanted us to capture this ship. This entire analysis has been exactly what they planned. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The humans hadn't lost a ship to superior Kaleth forces. They had sacrificed an obsolete vessel to gather intelligence on Dominion capabilities, while simultaneously revealing just enough of their own power to send a clear message. Dr. Nex pulled up the final section of decoded files which contained detailed scans of every Kaleth ship and facility the Defiance had encountered during its capture. The humans now knew everything about Dominion technology, military protocols, and defensive capabilities. They've been studying us while we thought we were studying them, she said quietly. Every sensor sweep we performed, every analysis we conducted, they were recording and analyzing through hidden systems built into their ship. Supreme Commander Vex stood up slowly, her face pale with the knowledge of what they had done. How long do we have? Captain Rex checked the long-range sensor displays and found his answer in the form of massive energy signatures approaching from the deep dark. Unknown vessels detected at the edge of sensor range, he reported. Multiple ships, moving at impossible speeds through regions our charts mark as impassable. The human fleet was coming, and the Kaleth Dominion had given them every piece of information they needed to ensure the coming confrontation would be completely one-sided. Admiral Crone looked around the conference table at the assembled leadership, seeing his own fear reflected in their faces. They played us perfectly, he said. We thought we were analyzing their capabilities, but we were really demonstrating our own limitations. They know everything about us now, and we've learned just enough about them to understand how hopeless our situation really is. The Defiance sat in the analysis bay below them, its crude hull and amateur modifications now revealed as the perfect disguise for the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. The humans had turned Kaleth arrogance against itself, using their enemy's sense of superiority to blind them to the trap they were walking into. The human fleet emerged from the void like predators stepping out of shadows. Captain Rex watched his sensor displays with growing horror as ship after ship appeared on the edge of Kepler Base's detection range. These vessels bore no resemblance to the crude battleship his people had been analyzing for the past month. The human ships moved through space with fluid grace, their hulls gleaming with materials that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Some ships appeared solid one moment and translucent the next, as if they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Others pulsed with energy patterns that made his sensors give contradictory readings, showing the same vessel in several different locations at once. Admiral Crone stood in the command center, watching the tactical display as more human ships continued to appear. The fleet was massive, easily 3 times the size of the entire Dominion Navy, and every ship radiated power signatures that exceeded anything in Kaleth databases. Open communication channels, Crone ordered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Let's see what they want. The main view screen activated, showing the bridge of the lead human vessel. The man who appeared was tall and lean, with graying hair and eyes that held the kind of weariness that came from fighting impossible battles for too long. He wore a simple uniform with minimal decorations, but his presence filled the screen with quiet authority. I am Admiral Kane of the Human Colonial Defense Force, the man said, his voice calm and measured. You have something that belongs to us. Admiral Crone tried to maintain his composure despite the fear growing in his chest. Admiral Kane, I am Admiral Crone of the Kaleth Dominion. We found your vessel drifting in space and brought it here for analysis. We are prepared to return it to you in exchange for appropriate compensation. Kane's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Compensation? Admiral, you've been studying the Defiance for 4 weeks. That was exactly how long we expected you to need to understand what you were really looking at. The implications of those words hit Crone like a physical blow. You wanted us to capture your ship? The Defiance was scheduled for decommission, Kane replied with what might have been amusement. Her crew was evacuated 3 days before you found her. We needed to know what your people would do when presented with human technology, and more importantly, we needed to know what you were capable of. Dr. Nex stepped forward, her face pale with understanding. You've been watching us. The entire time we were analyzing your ship, you were analyzing us. Kane nodded. Every sensor sweep you performed, every system you examined, every conversation you had near the ship was recorded and transmitted to our intelligence division. We now have complete information about Kaleth technology, military protocols, and command structure. Captain Rex felt sick as he realized how thoroughly they had been outmaneuvered. This was all a trap. Not a trap, Kane corrected. A test. Your people detected one of our obsolete vessels and decided to capture it for study. That decision told us everything we needed to know about Kaleth intentions and capabilities. Admiral Crone tried to salvage some dignity from the situation. What do you want from us? If this is about territorial disputes, we can negotiate boundaries that benefit both our peoples. Kane's expression grew serious. Admiral, your intelligence networks have apparently failed to inform you about the real situation in this galaxy. The Kaleth Dominion exists in a small bubble of safety that humans have died to maintain. You've been protected from threats you can't imagine, and your response is to plan expansion into our territory. The accusation stung because it was true. The Dominion had been planning to expand into human space, expecting easy conquest of what they believed was a primitive species. Now they understood how catastrophically wrong they had been. We didn't know, Crone said quietly. Our intelligence indicated that humans were technologically inferior. Your intelligence networks don't operate in the regions where we do our real work, Kane replied. You've been studying our civilian vessels and border colonies while ignoring the military infrastructure we maintain in the deep dark, Kane gestured, and the view screen split to show tactical displays of human military bases throughout the galactic core regions. The installations were massive, some built inside stars themselves, others floating in the event horizons of black holes. Each base bristled with weapons and defenses that made Kaleth technology look like children's toys. We've been fighting continuous wars for 2 centuries, Kane continued, against machine intelligences that can disassemble matter at the atomic level, energy beings that feed on electromagnetic radiation, and things that exist outside normal space-time. Every battle teaches us something new about survival. Dr. Nex stared at the displays showing human technology in action. Ships phased through solid matter to attack enemies from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons fired projectiles that traveled backwards through time to strike targets before they could defend themselves. Entire battle fleets coordinated their actions across light years of space using communication methods that operated faster than light itself. The Defiance was obsolete by our standards, Kane said, noting her expression. But even that old ship was designed based on combat experience your people have never faced. Every backup system, every redundant component, every crude modification was a lesson learned in battles against enemies that would annihilate your entire civilization. Admiral Crone felt the weight of his civilization's ignorance crushing down on him. What happens now? Kane's expression softened slightly. That depends on what you do next. The Kaleth Dominion can continue to exist in the Outer Rim, protected by human forces fighting battles you'll never see. Or you can continue planning expansion into regions where your technology and experience are inadequate for survival. The choice was clear but humiliating. The Dominion could accept their role as a protected species, acknowledging human superiority and abandoning their expansion plans. Or they could face annihilation either from human forces or from the galaxy-ending threats that humans were containing in the deep dark. Captain Rex spoke up, his voice barely audible. How many other species live under your protection without knowing it? Most of them, Kane replied. Peaceful civilizations develop in safe regions while we handle the dangerous ones. It's more efficient than trying to train every species for warfare against impossible enemies. The battle that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes, though. Calling it a battle was generous. Admiral Crone had ordered his ships to open fire when negotiations broke down, refusing to accept the humiliation of acknowledging Calith inferiority. The Dominion fleet attacked with everything they had, energy weapons blazing as they attempted to prove their technological superiority. The human ships didn't even bother to return fire immediately. They simply absorbed the Calith weapons discharges, without apparent damage, their hulls rippling like liquid as energy beams passed harmlessly through them. When the humans finally responded, their weapons tore through Dominion shields and armor as if they didn't exist. Dr. Nex watched from the observation deck of the research station as her civilization's most powerful warships were systematically dismantled by human technology they couldn't understand or counter. The humans weren't trying to destroy the Calith fleet, she realized. They were demonstrating the futility of resistance. When the Dominion ships finally stopped firing, Admiral Kane opened communications one final time. Admiral Crone, you've seen what we're capable of when we're being gentle. The enemies we fight in the deep dark don't show such restraint. The research station's sensors detected massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet as they prepared to depart. In those final moments, Dr. Nex understood the true lesson of the Defiance. The crude modifications and backup systems hadn't been signs of technological inferiority. They had been evidence of a species that had learned to survive against enemies that demanded absolute victory or total extinction. As the human fleet vanished back into the deep dark, leaving the crippled remnants of the Dominion Navy floating. In space, Admiral Crone transmitted a final message across known space. It was a warning to other civilizations about the fatal error of analyzing human technology while assuming superiority. The Calith Dominion had made the mistake of studying their enemy while believing themselves superior. They had learned, too, late that humans weren't hiding their capabilities. They had been waiting for someone arrogant enough to give them an excuse to demonstrate why they had claimed the galaxy's most dangerous territories. The Defiance sat alone in the analysis bay, its crude hull and amateur modifications now revealed as perfect camouflage for the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. The ship had served its purpose exactly as intended, teaching the Calith the difference between elegant engineering and survival-tested design. In the end, the humans had been right about everything. The galaxy was full of threats that peaceful civilizations couldn't imagine, let alone survive. The crude, ugly ships that the Calith had dismissed as primitive were actually the products of warfare against enemies that would have ended their civilization in minutes. The Defiance had been their final error, not because it was a trap, but because analyzing it had forced them to confront the truth about their place in a galaxy far more dangerous than they had ever imagined.